coroner does have the authority to order autopsies on anyone who dies if they believe it's necessary. The coroner is responsible to investigate all deaths that are particularly suspicious or violent deaths, but really it includes all deaths outside of the hospital or within 24 hours after entering the hospital. The death has to be reported to the coroner. And the coroner has to determine the cause of death and the amount of death. I find very few people know the difference. The cause of death could be, well, for an example, gunshot wound to the head could be a cause of death. But that could be an accident, it could be a homicide, it could be a suicide. The pathologist who does the autopsy in that case would determine the cause of death to be gunshot wound to the head. But the manner of death would have to be determined through investigation. I'm going to tell you a little, give you a case. I mean, how much time do I have, Kelly?
An hour,
okay.
5 minutes.
A good friend of mine is an attorney in Charlotte. He asked me, he called me a few years ago and told me that one of his 2 sons had just been found dead, and that law enforcement people were saying that he committed suicide. So I went right up to Charlotte, went to the medical examiner's office and visited someone I knew there, Donnie Bryant. I said, what can you tell me? He said, well, the medical examiner did an autopsy and said that he died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. So we looked at the evidence, and he got the police investigator on the phone. I talked with her. She resented my sticking my nose in her business, but I tried to, just make sure it was being well investigated. And as it turns out, he had asked his girlfriend to move out a couple of days earlier. She had a bad temper, and while he was sleeping, she put the gun up his head, pulled the trigger, and killed him. Well, now how was this determined? Well, through investigating, it was determined he had no gunpowder residue on his hands. She didn't either. She washed her hands. Her story started changing, and she was eventually convicted. But the coroner uses many experts to do the job. The pathologist does autopsies, but a lot of people who die don't need to have an autopsy. They only are done when there's a real good reason for doing it. Most people die of natural deaths under the care of a physician, and they have a medical record. Examination of the body, toxicology, these things can help to rule out a violent death or anyone else being involved.